what I'd like to do, Tanya, is I love to talk about people's foundations, their parents, role models, grandparents, the people that inspired them, and even some of the negative things that maybe also inspired people, to move forward. And I call it sort of the birth of success. Could we start there?
Absolutely. I am a native New Orleanian. I come from a long line Louisiana family, and I am inspired by multiple members of my family, starting first with my father and my mother. My dad, Roland Lombard, was a coach, highly regarded. As you know, sports are very important down in the South. And he taught me the importance of relationships, maintaining them and carrying them forward with you in life. My mother, Barbara Lombard, a corporate executive with Lockheed Martin. Then it was Martin Marietta. And she taught me how to understand and appreciate corporations and working in a corporate setting. Lombard versus the Supreme Court is the edict that came from the Supreme Court, which was one that allowed Blacks to eat at lunch counters. My Uncle Rudy Lombard, he was a member of CORE. My Uncle Ed, he broke barriers at Tulane University, and he just retired as a judge in Louisiana. So I come from a very political family. It was always my goal to come to Washington to be a political correspondent. As I arrived on Capitol Hill, I was an intern for our then New Orleans Congresswoman, Lindy Boggs. And I worked on the Hill, and as my former professor, Mark Morial, explained to me, he said, you'll keep moving in politics, Tanya, but you stay in the same house. You just move to different rooms. And so that was quite true. I have not become a political correspondent, but this path has taken me from the Hill to being the special assistant to President Clinton, advising him day to day on the political climate in America.
Let me
And
let
just
me ask let me ask you this quickly, Tanya. Are you
Sure.
familiar with the legendary Ethel Payne?
I do not know Ethel Payne.
But are you familiar with who she is?
No.
All right, Ethel Payne, I had the privilege to interview her, but she died about 20 years ago. But she was the first Black woman White House correspondent, and she interacted with Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon. She was just an extraordinary individual, and she really was the first Black American woman to be in the White House correspondent. So, just as a history note, you've got so much historical stuff going on, but check out Ethel Payne. She was quite remarkable.
Oh, I will definitely make it my mission, since that is the reason I came to Washington,
Yes.
D.C. I should definitely know that fact. I work for Mignon Moore
Yes.
at the White House, who has brought tremendous bearing as a mentor and a sister to me, as my life grew and it built in Washington, D.C.
So tell me, I want to go back for a second about growing up, but in terms of, since you brought it up, in terms of the Clinton White House, tell me what that was like, Tanya.
It was the ultimate experience. I started in presidential personnel, and I was responsible for getting applicants and people into the system, whether it was boards, commissions, or different agencies.
And was that
Uh,
working with Bob Nash?
Absolutely. Bob Nash was my first boss,
Okay.
and I worked directly under Charles Duncan.
Okay.
So it was a wonderful experience. As you know, Bob Nash is just awesome. It was a sense of pride uh, walking those halls and having an appreciation for what it meant to be there. For me, it was an opportunity to help more Black people engage and be a part of the pipeline, but not only Blacks, minorities, because President Clinton's charge was he wanted a White House that represented America. And so day to day, we had to, work on those goals. But to travel on Air Force One, day in and day out, it was surreal. And it was quite a wonderful opportunity. So, I can't describe it to anything else that I've done to date, but I always say I had my first job was my best job in terms of the White House. As we roll it back, I would do things a whole lot differently if I had that opportunity today.
It's like you've wet my whistle. What would you do differently?
I would capture more of the day to day. I would capture the experiences and the people that I met and the relationships. Things are moving so fast and in real time. You're in the moment, but you're not really capturing the moment. And we didn't really have the technology that we have today, that would allow you to be present and also capture those moments in real time.
Yeah. No, again, thank you for sharing that, Tanya. So going back to New Orleans, tell me about what was that like growing up? You talk about you have a very strong family, very strong political family. What was race like? Did you have any siblings? Also, just talk about that for a little bit, if you could, Tanya.
Growing up in New Orleans was wonderful. I always say I'm going to return and go back there. I am an only child. However, we have family, extended family, and I'm pretty much the odd person out that left because New Orleans people, as you know, they feel there's no place better in the world than being right there.
Yeah.
I loved growing up there. It was about the culture. It is the majority Catholic, Black Catholic city. The traditions that are carried out are still carried out. And with such beauty and with such grace and amazing traditions, you always have the flip side. The hurricanes. I was there for Hurricane Katrina. I went back to celebrate with my mother and some of my friends. And having a birthday on August 27th, you always were in the middle of a hurricane, getting notice of the beginning of one. Um, so we didn't really quite expect Hurricane Katrina to be the storm that it was. But it was important, and the way things work out, I was glad I was there to be with my mom so we could, leave the city and then make further plans after the storm had hit New Orleans. So we were not there proper. We were right outside
Okay.
by my grandmother's in Donaldsonville. But I still love the restoration of New Orleans. I work very hard on working with corporate partners such as Nike to send funding into New Orleans to build some of the parks and to contribute to the process, even though I was in a period of rebuilding my own life and helping my family after such a tremendous loss.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, I was going to ask you, and you've already mentioned one, but in terms of you growing up, your teenage years, were there some pivotal moments in New Orleans and even nationwide that sort of left an indelible mark on you, Tanya?
Oh, absolutely. In New Orleans, there were a lot of political markers. Having Dutch Morial to become the first mayor and, observing and, being a part of that campaign as a young person, just to watch how he maneuvered politically was just fascinating to me. So it was one of the markers, one of the drivers. And then with the city of New Orleans, uh, the culture, it became more on a national level. So it started driving more people in the city to seek and to understand not only the political side of it, but the tourism side. So watching such festivals that were very small as the Essence Festival come to life. It was very small when Mark Morial first brought the Essence Festival to the city. It was a way for the city to make money because July is one of the hottest months in the city and no one comes to visit. So to watch it build, and it is pretty much the largest festival now in New Orleans on a yearly basis. So to watch your city grow, to change, to evolve, it went from one festival, let's say jazz festival, to multiple festivals. The beauty of New Orleans is families don't change, the spirit doesn't change. And when you go back, those pivotal markers are still in the city of New Orleans. So it was wonderful to answer your question growing up, being a part of politics and really having a family rooted in the culture. Because my whole life growing up was about those New Orleans experiences.
And do you remember, were there any national events that you recall, again, as a young person, that sort of had a pivotal, were sort of pivotal in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I was working for Congressman then William Jefferson. He was the congressman from New Orleans. He hosted then Governor Clinton of Arkansas, who was running for president then, for a CBC fundraiser in New Orleans. So it was my first time meeting then Governor Clinton. And at that moment, listening to his speech and just being around him, I knew that I wanted to go back to Washington and I wanted to work for him. So
Mhm.
that was definitely one of those key pivotal moments that took place in New Orleans.
Thank you. So you talked about your dad was a coach, your mom was an executive. Tell me a little bit about um, what they instilled in you, Tanya. What lessons did you learn from them?
Oh, absolutely. Just two wonderful people. I'm just so fortunate to have had, the mother and father that was chosen for me by the Almighty. What they instilled in me is to always be able to walk with kings and queens, but never lose the common touch. And to always be helpful to others. My parents were very much service parents. My father, as a coach, would always have, students and players coming in if there was a need. And, my mother was a true partner to my father because she stood right there at the ready to assist. So it was very important, even as an only child, for them to instill in me. It is bigger than me. It's about the world, right?
Yes.
If I can touch somebody along the way, then my living truly will not be in vain. So it's about service. They instilled in me the spirit of service.
And obviously having such great role models as your parents, in terms of teachers or anyone else in the community or grandparents, did you have anyone else that was very sort of supportive of you and saw you going in a phenomenal trajectory?
I was very lucky. There were so many people, and I really don't want to leave anyone out. However, I feel several of my teachers in grammar school, Sister Anastasia, Sister Jenny, they were definitely pivotal, Sister Ramal. And I was able to go back and film their anniversary. I did a documentary piece working with this on a digital platform that I have called The Humanity of Connection. And I was able to be with them and actually tape my grandfather's sisters Sister Mary Lucille, she had a placard in there. She had passed when I was younger, but the Holy Family nuns, they're an order of Black nuns in the city of New Orleans. So I not only got to go back to spend time with these women who molded and shaped me and nurtured me as a young woman to grow up into the phenomenal, opportunities that I've had in life, and really know how to meet and approach those opportunities. I got to go back and be with them and give them something back. So that for me was very fulfilling.
That's beautiful. So tell me then, you've got these highly successful parents. Um, I can assume that they both went to college. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so the idea that you were going to college was a no-brainer, right?
That's correct.
So then tell me then, as you're going through high school, where are you thinking about going to college and what are the interests that you have, Tanya?
Well, I really wanted to go to Howard. I wanted to go to Spelman.
Okay.
And I had the conversation with my parents, and my dad was like, you know what, Tanya, I would love for you to go to those schools, but he was like, I think Xavier would be a better choice for you right now. And at first I didn't quite understand, but he had already, made sure that I understood that was the direction we were going to go in. So I went to Xavier, and it proved to be the best choice my father ever made for me. Um, I got to intern with Congresswoman Lindy Boggs, and I was at home, but college was just wonderful because I had the best of both worlds. I was with my family. I enjoyed Xavier, but Xavier yielded a lot of fruit. The opportunities for internships, and working in various offices throughout the city with alumni during my time at Xavier. So it was a wonderful experience, and it's a university where members of my family have gone and for so long, and it was tradition. So I definitely appreciated my time. And look, my parents were very free with me. They allowed me to make a lot of decisions, but there were some decisions that they felt they needed to intervene and help guide me. And look, I love them for that.
Yeah.
I'm an only child, and they are both deceased now. And I live with so much of the guidance, so many of the things that they taught me. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times, you can think back and you can say, you know what, they were absolutely correct.
Yeah.
You may not feel it at that time,
Yeah.
but in time, it all rolls out and, it plays out for itself. Um, I just think my parents were wonderful. One, me being an only child, making sure I was socialized around a lot of people. So young, working at campaigns and, just kind of always busy, reading at the Catholic Church on Sundays in the Mass. They kept me on, a very busy schedule, but they made sure that I understood all backgrounds of people.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a myopic thinker, but the fabric, it was broad. And if somebody needed help, it was incumbent on me to make sure that I did just that.
I'm not always a big fan of this, but I've got to ask, do you ever think, what if you had gone to Howard, if you had gone to Spelman?
No, because here's what it is. I have met all of those people anyway.
Okay.
A lot of them were my friends when I was at Xavier. And so it was just fine. I did go to Howard for one class, planetary sciences, while I was working in DC at an internship for one summer. So I kind of checked that box. Now
Okay.
I do not go around saying I was a bison, no, but I love the experience. It's just so beautiful there. But I don't really have any regrets in terms of my college experience. Because when you think about the time you have to be with your parents and your family, as the aging process begins for them, that was a wonderful time to actually get an additional 4 years.
Yes, wonderful. So when you go to Xavier, what are you thinking about majoring in? And then what do you ultimately major in?
So when I go to Xavier, I am thinking about majoring in mass communications because I want to be a political correspondent in Washington, D.C. Ultimately, my love for politics, uh, Chairman Gary Clark, I went into political science. And it was a combination of poli-sci mass communications. And my minor was it was in some of the arts in photography.
Okay.
Um, and so for me, it was doing a lot of interviews on campus, and kind of having a political rollout, but also becoming an intern in Washington, D.C. and loving it so much. I knew I went back to Xavier after my first internship and I took an overload of courses so I could get back to DC just that fast. It was incredible, because it wasn't a structure of the haves and the have-nots. You saw so many influential Black people with big businesses. In New Orleans, it was a few, but in DC, it was just everywhere. So it was just so impressive. I knew I wanted to get back home to Xavier, so that, I took an overload and I did meet my goal of getting back to DC. And I then became an assistant at my former boss, where I interned, Congresswoman Lindy Boggs, in her office. I was the receptionist and I loved it.
So that first internship, where was that,
It
Tanya?
was in DC
I know, but
at
where?
Congresswoman Lindy
Wow.
Boggs
Okay.
on the Hill.
Okay.
I was a Lyndon Baines Johnson intern. And that was wonderful. And, at that time, I used to run across the Capitol back and forth, getting this letter signed, that letter signed. It entailed me working the auto pen, having every letter signed that had to go back, in the district. And I just loved every moment of it. And I just knew I had to get back.
So when you go back, what job is waiting for you?
When I went back, it was just school. I was getting the overload, so you couldn't really work and,
Well,
have a.
once you graduated, Xavier, what did you when you went back to Washington?
I came back to Congresswoman Lindy Boggs's
Okay.
office.
Okay.
That's where I was telling you I was the receptionist.
Receptionist. And you were the receptionist for how long?
Oh, I want to say maybe 1 or 2 years,
Okay.
as long as until her retirement.
And then what happened? What happened
She
after that?
retired. Congressman Jefferson ran against Mark Morial, and then I moved over into the same second congressional district of New Orleans, Louisiana, that office.
Okay.
And so, I was a ledger helper, special projects. So it was wonderful. It kept me between New Orleans and DC.
What did you, in retrospect, what did you find interesting about politics?
It Working in Washington in politics, it's the city that dictates changes to the nation. And these changes in these bills and laws, you were right at the precipice involved in it in Washington, D.C. And then you understood the layers, from the lobbyists to the think tanks to the concerned citizens and the actual passage of laws that are impactful for most of us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. So at that point, what are you sort of thinking about? I know you get mass communications, you're involved in politics. Where are you sort of seeing yourself going, Tanya?
I'm seeing myself moving up most certainly in the office because here I am on the Hill. It's the best thing, the best feeling because I've made it. Uh, and I didn't focus too much on the communications aspect,
Okay.
but I did always have this yearning to make it in the White House. So I started moving in a way where I could volunteer on trips and do White House advance or, be a part of events. And through those opportunities, I met the right people. And I followed up diligently. And there was an opening in presidential personnel. And that's when I got to work for Bob Nash, specifically for Charles Duncan. And that's when my world began to really take off in terms of focused on what I had come to Washington to build and to do.
So we talked about Bob Nash. Did you know his wife very well, Janice Kearney?
Oh, absolutely. Both of them.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful couple.
Yes. Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I've been fortunate to interview both of them, and actually, Bob is actually on my board. So yeah, just yeah, they are an extraordinary couple, and they really don't get the credit that they really deserve.
And you know what? They don't, and they just are so below the radar, but they are giants in
Yes.
terms of all the people they've touched, all the people that they have helped. They are two wonderful individuals.
Yeah. I agree. So you're there at the White House, and so you've been plotting this course. You're at the White House. You talked a little bit about it. And how long were you there, Tanya?
Ooh, what was it? Five years?
Okay. And what would you say? I'm sure there must be many, but one or two outstanding moments that you remember?
Um, there were so many moments. There's never one or two when you're, in the White House. But absolutely the first time, my first trip on Air Force One, going to work in the regions with President Clinton. But every day was just super special. And I don't mean to sound corny, but it is such a tremendous opportunity that a lot of people never get to engage in a day-to-day basis. And to just walk those halls and meet the culinary folks and the people who are working the grounds and just making sure you learn a little bit about everyone and they teach you something. So for me, I really can't point to one opportunity. Every day was super stellar there.
Was there any, did you end up meeting anyone that stood out to you?
I met everybody. I have so many friends that exist from the White House. Nelson Mandela's visit. I was still on the Hill, quasi working with the CBC at that time with Amelia Parker. That's when it was a legislative synopsis organization. So I mean, I could just kind of go through the roles of the people I've met, um, but it's just I've been fortunate.
Yeah.
I have been very fortunate in the halls I've walked in the people I've been able to spend time with and met through the relationships I have carried from, New Orleans to Washington.
No, no, again, thank you for sharing that, Tanya. So let me skip forward now. And you're at AT&T, Vice President, Public Affairs. Tell me about how that process started. Let's start with that.
How did the process started? The process started, I was at a firm. I had had, spent some time in corporate America at a firm, and they were looking for somebody who could manage multicultural engagement. And so we had a conversation, and took a couple of months, transpired. They followed back up, and I decided to go back into corporate America. At that time, it was about working with third parties and representing the community. And that's what was very exciting for me, to have a position in a company at the intersection of corporate America and the civil rights community.
Okay. And you've been with AT&T how long, Tanya?
13 years.
13 years. What do you, what's drawn you and kept you at AT&T? What makes that a good fit for you?
Oh, I love it. I wake up every morning, and I can make a difference in communities of colors. I also represent the left of center, right of center, and the academia segments. Uh, and, for me, being able to make a difference and effectuate change and see it through a company, that is what's kept me here. It's a wonderful opportunity. You can go from working in issue items, such as bridging the digital divide, to now with the Biden administration infrastructure bill, to now making sure that we have digital equity, and making sure that a lot of these HBCUs that are broadband deserts will get the service and be competitive and be on par. So just being able to help out all communities. And it's fascinating meeting so many people from so many backgrounds, and to be of assistance, because this is a specialized area where I get to be in the community every day for AT&T.
Yeah. Well, you talked about one of the examples, which was bringing broadband to HBCUs. Can you give me some other examples that you're really proud of that you've been able to do there at AT&T?
Oh, absolutely. One of my proudest moments is a platform that was created called the Humanity of Connection. And the Humanity of Connection is a platform that went into the community to shine a light on diversity, internally and externally. So you can learn a little bit about us, and we can learn about the communities where we have services and we have partners.
What kind of advice would you give to a young person, a young woman, young person in general, but what kind of things would they need to do to sort of follow your footsteps in terms of college courses, uh, careers prior to joining a company like AT&T, becoming a high-powered executive? What kind of things would you suggest, Tanya?
I would suggest that never take any relationship, any chance meeting for granted. Really follow up with people, because that's what's important. You never know who has a relationship uh, just with other people you may be interested in meeting. But also to sit and seek out the three people you want to be the most like, and try to reach out to them.
Mm.
Start relationships. I get emails all the time. I think I spend so much time following up with people who want to talk to me about their career choices, what they're thinking about. And what comes out of those meetings is, if I can't help them, I can always shoot them to a relationship that I do have that could, further, help them understand what it takes to get to the next level of where they want to go.
Okay. So, in terms of advice, in terms of people of color, in terms of women, where do you think we stand now, Tanya? Is it easier? Is it harder in terms of going down that path and achieving the success that you've had in terms of, race and sexism? How do you sort of get your head around that, and the advice that you give around that?
Well, I get my head around in terms of the is it easier or harder? I think when you look at corporate America, when you look at being in the business environment, you certainly have to be the best that you can be. I try to tell women not to have blinders and go down that, oh, I have to focus on this because I'm a woman or I have to do something differently. I just think you need to focus on being the best, being educated on the topic that you represent, knowing that you can stay in the conversation, and create a whole table for yourself,
Hmm.
if the need be.
Okay. So you talk about relationships, and I know that Mignon Moore is one of your mentors. Can you talk about as you evolved in this whole corporate world? Are there people, are there mentors, role models that you had, people like Mignon that you really relied on, Tanya?
Oh, absolutely. It is fascinating because Mignon Moore and I started, when I was doing some events, but really at the White House. And after the White House, we remained, very close. I really go to her for advice. But now we work together. She had long been a consultant at AT&T before I even came on board.
Okay.
So those relationships are very, important. And that's what I tell people. You never know where you're going to wind up and, how someone can help you in the future.
So is there anyone else that you'd like to mention that
Oh, there's so
so
many
many?
people.
Well, I
That
won't put you on the spot then.
no, no, no. There's so many people. I mean, Mark Morial, growing up in New Orleans, knew him then, and he was my college professor. And now he's the head of the National Urban League, and we work together on a daily basis.
Wow.
So that is a very key and critical, important relationship. And look, I look at the leaders that I have, um, the opportunity to work with at AT&T, and it's just so many bright people across the segments. And I call them for advice. And I love to do a self check, right? Am I too far to the left or to the right in terms of am I doing the right thing? So I like feedback from my leaders. And one of my favorite sayings is never believe your own press release. So it's always great to get feedback on how you're doing and if there's something you need to calibrate or what you could do different.
Okay. So in terms of the things that you're doing, and in terms of AT&T
Sure.
and the outreach, um, again, are you happy with how AT&T is reaching out to the communities of color? And what, again, as a young person, in terms of internships, in terms of other opportunities, anything that you recommend?
Absolutely. AT&T has wonderful internship programs, their DE&I programs, which a lot of the recruitment is housed in that area. It is really super stellar. It's on the website. It's right there, if you want access to it. And I think what's so important and what people have to understand is the consistency. AT&T's birthday was just the other day. And 147 years old. In 3 years, we'll be 150 years old in America. But I say that to say we have had decades of relationships in the community. So this is not new to us at AT&T. We're true to this.
No, thank you for illuminating on that. Thank you, Tanya. So, one of the things that's very important for us now is this idea of financial literacy. and trying to get young people, people of color, to learn more about financial literacy and potentially financial success. What's
Mhm.
sort of your take on where we are in terms of that, Tanya?
I absolutely think it should be a core part of curriculum. I think, back in the day, people used to actually have the physical Financial Times paper. But I do think that for our young people, we have to teach them about saving, about understanding the earnings report, because a lot of digital currency conversations are going back and forth, but you have to understand the value of what a dollar is, the importance of learning how to save when young, because as we saw in COVID, life could have gone a lot of different directions for those people who could not get assistance from the government and who actually hadn't saved. And so savings for young people, I feel, is very important. And just financial literacy. There needs to be programs that are a part of the curriculum now. When I first started, in corporate America, we partner with Magic Johnson and the National Urban League on a financial literacy program called Know Your Money. And we traveled across the United States to do just that. HBCUs and other National Urban League younger chapters to get information how to better be a part of, this financial revolution. It is extremely important. I think it's one of the most important things.
So let me ask you this. Why do you think it's not taught in schools, let's say high schools or junior high schools? I mean, because obviously it's right. If you have parents who aren't in tune with that and aren't discussing financial literacy and you're not getting it in school, I mean, where have we fallen short? Why do you think that's not in the curriculum, Tanya?
I'm not quite sure why it's not in the curriculum. However, I feel it's incumbent upon us who we have conversations with legislators and governors all the time. We need to make that one of our talking points because we're always very quick to say, well, hey, companies don't invest enough in Black businesses, or why aren't you working with our community? But to me, that's the basis of everything. That's where everything is going to begin, is having those conversations on a state level, on a national level, to make this a part of the curriculum.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the Magic Johnson project, Know Your Money, and you talked about you went around the country. Is that program still exist, and how successful do you think it was?
I thought the program was extremely successful. It was a sponsorship, I believe, for 2 years. And so it does not exist, but a lot of times when I talk to folks, it's one of the first things they bring up, how wonderful it was.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I mean, was it? Just tell me briefly about what the project was. I mean, did you have speakers? Did you have materials? How did that work, Tanya?
Oh, we had a kit, a Know Your Money kit. We sponsored Magic Johnson. We highlighted, a targeted amount of cities. He would come in and talk about his successes, in terms of being financially literate and the importance of it.
Hmm.
And so we would get some of the younger Urban League chapters, and as well as in specific cities they would build, various audiences. So it was targeted, and it was just extremely important that they had the materials to move through this project. But most importantly, it was Magic Johnson urging young people at the time to make this a priority.
Thank you, Tanya. So, in terms of you, in terms of if you don't mind me asking, in terms of your financial literacy and you know, your first internship jobs, being a receptionist, now being a corporate executive, um, could you share sort of some of your tips, some of the good things and bad things that you sort of in terms of not necessarily investments, but in terms of your financial literacy, the things that you've learned, and maybe things that you could share, personal stories.
Sure. I think for me, everything is about savings. Everything is getting a finite budget and sticking to it. All too often in the scroll society, you come across something or Amazon is so easily, it just makes it impossible for you to say no. And I'm not knocking these companies. I'm speaking from the perspective of Tanya. I love scrolling and just adding something to the cart. So for me, what's important is really getting a budget and sticking to it, and getting the necessary items, but making sure that I am saving and understand the importance of what these savings are for. And, understanding that, look, the future comes fast. And so we have to prepare and make sure that we can take care of ourselves. Uh, it's just a no-brainer when you think about, if I would have saved when I first got on the hill, let's just say a third of it, what a difference that would have made. But you're young, you're like, oh, I have time, and you do have time. However, it would just be so beneficial if you start at a younger age building that mindset and strengthening that muscle of, financial protection and literacy is very important.
So in terms of that savings, you talked about, if you had started saving a third back in the early days,
Sure.
do you try to, in terms of today or over your last 10 years, do you try to set aside a certain amount, a third of what you make to, for savings?
Oh, absolutely. I try to do as best I can. And if there's a little bit more to save, I do just that. I mean, because it's just important. And especially, in these times, like I would have never thought with COVID, we would be at home for 2 years. I mean, we've come on the other side of a pandemic, right? And so that should have taught us how to live every day with a lot less.
So you talk about savings, obviously, which is very important.
Sure.
But in terms of investing, when did that, do you do a lot of investing, and when did that sort of come onto your radar, if you do?
My Uncle Rudy, um, through his, he was a civil rights activist, did a lot of great things. But he was into banking. And so that came on my radar when I was very young. And so I definitely like to look at the markets, understand and play a little bit, but I'm not a very big risk taker.
I understand. And when you mentioned that, do you think that's what do you attribute that to in terms of a person being a big risk taker
I
versus
think
being more
just kind
conservative?
of my first jobs in government funds, and everything is kind of built on stability. It's just how I'm built. I think if I was, trained more in business as opposed to political science, those the business leaders are built differently. They're all in, right? They're all in.
All right, so you talked, one of the beautiful things you talked about was, pick three people that you'd like to sort of emulate and try to see if you can introduce yourself to them. So in terms of, do you hold that same adage in terms of financial literacy, financial wealth, Tanya?
Oh no, absolutely. Melody Hobson is one person on my bucket list I would love to have lunch with. I mean, she has just mastered it perfectly. And she gives so much back, and she's always willing to have a conversation. And my experience at Harvard Business School. So some of my professors, we had, various case studies. So I sometimes I would just like to, sit down with them and kind of revisit some of those opportunities. And I think, look, Robert Smith has been remarkable. And he is doing a lot of good with the funds that he has in terms of scholarships, in terms of he's really kind of digging into broadband and understanding the importance of that technical currency that is going to, help bridge the digital divide, which is critical. Before we can even get to financial well-being, we've got to have the tools and the apparatus to make sure our community has, to be able to invest, to be able to read, to be able to study, and to be on par with all other students and people who are engaging, in the market as such.
You had talked about this a little bit about AT&T. Tell me about, if you're a young person, you don't have a laptop, you don't have an iPad, so much stuff. Obviously, we know during the pandemic was people were at home. You don't have access to the internet. Talk about how we address that, because obviously, right, that is a huge disadvantage for those young people that don't have access to that.
Well, right now we're in the process of building connected learning centers throughout the United States, where students can come. There's Wi-Fi, there are computers, and so those are the opportunities, not just for students, but for adults. If they have to fill out an application or if they have to respond. So we have connected learning center sites throughout the U.S., as well as the third parties that we work with, such as the National Action Network, Urban League, LULAC, Apex, and a host of others. We're working to make sure that they have all the technical advantages for their constituencies, so their folks can come in and utilize technology when there's a need for it. So we're not only working in terms of fiber deployment to bridge the digital divide, but we actually have places you can go in, and we don't have them in every state, but we're growing to go in and be a part of these connected learning centers.
So if you're a young person or an adult who doesn't have access to the things you just talked about, how could they find if there is a center near them?
Well, they can go online and look up our connected learning centers, and they can also check with some of their organizations, such as the NAACP, Urban League, Unidos. They have tech centers around the country. JACL. We can kind of help them and guide them if ever needed, because it's important resource. As we saw during COVID, our poor students are sitting outside of, restaurants and trying to get Wi-Fi so they can compete on the most basic level
Yes.
with other students. And it was horrific.
Yes. No, no, that's true. And again, thank you for that, Tanya. So one of the last things I want to ask is, and you again kind of touched on it, in terms of giving advice, to young people in terms of pursuing their careers, their dreams, um, aspirations. What do you say to these young kids, Tanya?
Well, I want them to know their history first. And all history is just not found on Instagram or TikTok. I want them to know their history, because then you know who you are and whose you are. And that's critically important to develop aspirations, because you don't want to just aspire to have the most likes in social media, but understanding the pioneers and the giants that have come before them. Look at an occupation that you're interested in. Try to read as much as you can about that person and then try to figure out how you're going to get to that person. Is it through somebody on their team? You know, you may try to direct mail them, somebody may respond, but you need to figure out how you're going to build relationships to get to the places you want to get. And I'm not knocking social media. I love it. But I think that would be the advice I would have for them.
So again, it is relationships, relationships, and relationships. I mean, it's giving back, right? And it's about being positive, treating people with great respect. Um, if you treat people well, you know, the golden rule, treat people the way you wanted to be treated, right? I mean, that's sort of what you're
Yes,
alluding to.
that's absolutely a part of it. But what's important with these relationships is make sure they're 50-50, right?
Mhm.
They're 50-50 in your relationships. And don't think because I'm at AT&T, there's an article or something that you may have that I wouldn't be interested in. You know, just always double check. It's a lot of times I don't know about things that are going on or something that's important. Everybody has something to bring to the table, no matter how small or how large.
Mhm. Well, no, on that note, Tanya, thank you so very much. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for, sharing, your history, your story is fantastic. And, I'd love to get a chance to talk to you again sometime. I think we just scratched the surface, but, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you very much. This has been wonderful, and I look forward to connecting with you again.
This is the Black Experience for all. If you like what you hear at the Black Experience, please consider clicking on the join button to support our nonprofit. I'm Adam P. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us.